What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, if you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet, you're living under a rock, seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get into another very interesting topic here on the show, and a question I am posed with all the time, whether it's DMs, emails, or messages alike. What is going on today with the American Mafia? Now, several channels and several podcasts have looked into this exact topic. It's important to understand the Mafia is a very different entity than it was 20 or 30 or 40 years ago. It's still around. Now, in 1963, according to an FBI intelligence report, the feds would allege that there were 22 active mafia families in America. Today, that number has been more than cut in half. We're going to get into today what the current leadership of all these families look like, what families are still around, which ones are defunct, and which are the most powerful. The story of the current American Mafia. Next on Sit Down Shorts. The first city we will get started with is Detroit, a city that has been known over the years as the place where cars are made. And the Mafia has, for a large part of history, been mostly secret. Now, over the years, we've heard the names such as Zerilli, Giacalone, and for many people, they believe that was the last place Teamsters boss, Jimmy Hoffa, was seen alive. The current boss of the Detroit partnership is said to be Jackie Giacalone, seen here with his daughter. Now, Jackie Giacalone, from what I understand, takes a very interesting approach to the Mafia. As many people know, wherever you go in America, most of these families keep low-key statures. The number two in the family is said to be longtime member Anthony Chicago Tony LaPiana. Now, according to my good friend Scott Bernstein, I chatted with him recently about the Detroit partnership, and he would tell me that as far as made members, there's said to be about 20 to 25 made members in the family. Now, as we know with Detroit, they've had a long success over the years with evading mob informants. For the most part, they have been very much spared as far as having rats that have destroyed the family. There's been a lot of big-time names over the years, whether it's Tocco, Zerilli, Giacalone, and for large parts of the history of the Mafia, Detroit has been a baron as far as keeping secret and making money. That today, the current crime leadership in the city really is now under the leadership of black gangs and or different Middle Eastern groups, including Chaldeans. Detroit partnership, as I said, still maintains a little bit of a foothold in the Big D. We take our talents to Chicago, the Windy City, a city that for many years has been dominated by a group called the Chicago Outfit. As we know, the Chicago Outfit goes back to the early 20th century when a man called Big Jim Colosimo was in control of the rackets. Now, at that point, Chicago Outfit was more of a gang, and as we know, it would come under the leadership for large parts under Al Capone, Frank Nitti, Paul Ricca, Tony Accardo, and others. Up until about 2014, a man called John No-Nos DeFranzo was said to be the leader of the Chicago Outfit. Today, though, according to the federal government, they believe this man, Salvatore Sali De Laurentiis, is in control of the Chicago Outfit. Now, for interesting purposes, many people have tried to speak to Sully De Laurentiis, including many different news organizations. At one point, Sully De Laurentiis would tell ABC7 in Chicago, quote, "I'm in the carpet cleaning business." And he would also laugh off the fact that he was involved with the Mafia, saying, quote, "The outfit is like a group that comes in here to paint the walls," he told investigators. "It's the painting outfit." Also, during that same interview, he would say that he at one point was a bricklayer by trade and a part-time gambler. "We gamble," he said. "But as far as the Mafia, I don't know what that is." Sully De Laurentiis would continue to keep that profile according to people around him up until today. Now, the number 2 is said to be Albert Albie the Falcon Vina. Now, Vina is said to be a very high-ranking member of the mob and really goes back to the days of the old Grand Avenue crew. At one point, he did beat a murder rap in the 90s and is said to currently really run the day-to-day operations of the Chicago outfit. Now, according to many, there's about 30 to 50 made members. There is said to be a lot of associates in the Chicago outfit. There are not a ton of made guys anymore, but there are a lot of associates. For large parts of his succession, Albert Vina is said to run his operations, and for large parts of time, out of Richard's Bar on Milwaukee Avenue, near Grand Avenue. The Chicago outfit today is much quieter. And as we know, Chicago is now dominated by urban gangs like the Gangster Disciples and different groups along those lines. We head up to the area of Boston, a very interesting place. As we know, for years, the New England area was dominated by an individual called Raymond Patriarca. The brothers Angiulo ran Boston for a period of time. Today, the feds would allege the current boss of New England is Carmen Cheeseman D'Annunzio. Now, D'Annunzio runs his operations out of a social club in the North End. He gets his name from the fact that he runs a cheese shop in that area. Now, he would take over allegedly after the death of longtime underworld figure Peter Limone would die. Also, there is said to be a high-ranking leadership still in the area of Providence as well, which comes under the auspice of New England. That is said to be run by longtime American Mafia member, a good-looking Matt Guglielmetti. Now, Guglielmetti has recently been in the news and is still said to be very active. Now, interestingly enough, from what I understand, many people actually believe, now this has never been confirmed by the powers that be, but a lot of people truly believe the real person pulling the strings in the New England Mafia is this individual, Spucky Spagnuolo. Now, Spucky is a guy that really goes back to the old days of Boston. He, for a long time, was very involved with gambling, the video poker machine business, and up into the mid-2010s was actually in prison after he was extorting multiple video poker machine businesses. The truth of the matter is, Spucky Spagnuolo, the man from Revere, Massachusetts, is very involved still in the day-to-day running and could possibly be the leader of the crime family. Still a pretty active group as far as I know. And from what I also understand, there is also a small amount of younger guys that are trying to keep the group alive. People said to be related to Carmen D'Annunzio and other members of the current leadership. So Boston could be an area that we want to keep an eye on that is still, look, very involved. There's still plenty of sports betting. There's still plenty of loan sharking. And some of those neighborhoods are still involved in Mafia day-to-day activities. For long periods of time, Buffalo, the city in New York, was considered to be unknown as to what was going on. For many years, though, there has been a large Mafia presence in Buffalo. We obviously go back to the early years of the mob, and there are guys like Stefano Magaddino who were very involved with the original commissions, really in, not the originals, but in the 50s and the 60s. Today, the family is said to be run by Joe Todaro Jr. Now, Todaro is a very interesting individual. As we know, he is the proprietor of the pizza chain La Nova, and many people would credit Joe Todaro with actually being the originator of the Buffalo wing. Yes, you've heard that right. Chicken wings. La Nova, though, is a very successful operation, and taking the reins from his father, Lead Pipe Joe Todaro, in the 80s, Todaro has really been very much in the publicity and in spotlights. I've done a video in my library on the fact that in 2019-ish, famed pizza reviewer and Barstool boss Dave Portnoy actually went to the restaurant and had a long conversation on camera with Joe Todaro, where he even joked about the Mafia, and Todaro laughed it off. Buffalo, though, is still very active. The problem for the federal government is they have never been able to tie anything to Joe Todaro. On the surface, he looks like a businessman who just has an Italian name, but the feds would believe that he is the active boss of the family. Now, Todaro has never been arrested or convicted of any crime. The alleged underboss is said to be powerful Canadian mobster Domenico Violi. Now, Violi was heard on wiretap discussing that in 2017, his promotion to underboss. At one point, a member of the family would tell Violi, quote, "Dominic, you've made history. Nobody in Canada has ever held such a big position in the Buffalo crime family." Now, Violi is very connected to the Lupino crime family based out of Hamilton, Ontario. If you know anything about the Lupino family, the original boss of the Lupinos was actually Violi's grandfather. So Violi has a large standing and a long standing in not only Buffalo, but in Canada as well. Interestingly enough, Violi is very involved and has spent a lot of time in prison. In fact, at one point, he was allegedly responsible for trafficking about 200,000+ pills, including PCP, methamphetamine, and Molly. And at one point, the federal government would arrest Domenico Violi and would find a signed photo involving members of the Sopranos. So Violi is said to be a fan of American gangster culture played out on the big screen. Now we head over to a family that I did want to discuss just a little bit. The important thing to understand about the current mafia leadership in America is when I said back in 1963, there were 22 active mob families, and many of them are now defunct, including San Jose, San Francisco, Denver, Dallas, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Tampa, and New Orleans. Now, New Orleans is an interesting place. I do believe there are certain members of certain families maybe still running some operations in New Orleans. Up until the mid-2010s, locals still believe that certain places are run, said to be by the mob. Now, I don't believe it has anything to do with actually New Orleans gangsters, but different families maybe from New York and other eastern cities. Now, in Kansas City, that is a city that's still very interesting. I do not believe the Kansas City family is active. Now, as I've talked about with New Orleans, there are still older members of the old Kansas City crime family around. I do believe certain parts of North Kansas City still probably have some gambling bookies and things of that nature, but an actual family, I don't believe we still have. You need leadership, and I believe the leadership is now gone. For long parts of history, the Kansas City family was actually run by this individual, Nick Savella. Savella was very involved with Chicago and very involved with the skimming operation done in Las Vegas. If you've ever seen Casino, Savella is really one of the individuals that that film is almost based on when they show Kansas City. Now, once Savella would pass away in the mid-'80s, the family would really come under the control of Willie the Rat Comisano. Now, Comisano would get his nickname after he was allegedly dumping bodies in sewers and would allow rats to get to them. Willie the Rat, to me, is one of the most imposing individuals I've ever seen associated with the mob. I mean, just look at those eyes. Really a Neil Delacroix type of stare. Now, Willie the Rat would actually pass away in 1995, and his two sons were actually very involved with the mafia. At one point, it was alleged that his son, Willie Jr., was in control of the mob and was very involved at one point, Willie Jr., in casinos in Las Vegas. He is said to, though, be either just not involved anymore or just very sick. At one point in early 2021, the family of Willie Jr. Comisano actually would create a GoFundMe to support various issues that he has had medically. And the charity is actually still up on GoFundMe if you would like to contribute. Another weird connection involving the Comisanos was the fact that one of the other sons of Willie the Rat, Gerolamo Comisano, seen here on the left, was a very high-ranking, very involved bookmaker. At one point in 2011, he was said to be the head of an over $2 million a year bookmaking ring in Kansas City. In 2011, he would get 14 months on that beef and come out in the mid-2010s. Now, a weird connection here. In the mid-2010s, an individual seen here, Michael Sam on the right was drafted by the St. Louis Rams in the NFL draft. He would be seen kissing the individual on the right, Vito Comisano. Now, Comisano is the grandson of Willie the Rat Comisano. And it was actually very interesting because many people wondered during that very reported kiss during the NFL draft involving Sam and his boyfriend Vito, who exactly was Vito? We put together the fact that the last name was a very rich name in the Missouri area, and we tied back to the fact that Vito is actually the grandson of Willie the Rat. New Jersey is a very interesting, fertile area for mobsters. The family today is a little different than it once was. As we know, shows like The Sopranos are said to be based off certain members of the DeCalvacanti crime family and have had many competent leaders, including Sam the plumber and John Riggi. The current boss is said to be Charles Big Ears Maggiore. Now, Maggiore is an individual that has been around the Mafia really since the 50s. His father was involved with the DeCalvacanti crime family, and he has said to have been the boss really since about 2016, 2017. One of his higher-ups in the family is an individual called Charles Beeps Stango. Stango is from Elizabeth, New Jersey, and has been alleged involved in multiple murders. He is just finishing up a long prison sentence on multiple racketeering counts and is currently said to be in a halfway house in New Jersey. The real Sopranos, as they call them, are a bit more reserved. We don't hear about them as much, but there is still involvement for the DeCalvacanti crime family, not only in Newark, but in Elizabeth and other North Jersey rackets. Now, down in Philadelphia, not far away from the DeCalvacanti crime family, the Philadelphia group is still said to be alive and well. The city of brotherly love has had a bad past as far as beefs and or informants. This family has been destroyed by informants over the years and just really ill-legitimized leadership, everyone from Nicky Scarfo to John Stanfa. Now, the federal government at one point would say that the family was run by Joseph Skinny Joey Merlino. Recently, though, Merlino has popped up hanging around Florida, and he has really lived in Florida for over a decade at this point. He has very nondescript relationships still in Philadelphia. Obviously, he'll always have friends in that area and has been seen in Margate and other South Jersey locales. But for the most part, Merlino really just stays away and golfs and things from what I've seen. I don't believe he is very much still the boss of the family. I do believe that is in the hands of someone else. Now, at one point recently, the Justice Department would actually identify that on wiretap, it was discussed that the boss of the Philadelphia Mafia was this individual, Mikey Lancelotti. Now, Lancelotti is a very nondescript individual, has never really been involved much in crimes. He's never been really convicted of much, and is said to be very low-key. If he is indeed running any sort of mafia in Philadelphia, he's done it in a very nondescript way. The rest of the leadership in Philadelphia has, for large parts, been under the eye of the law. As we know, alleged underboss Handsome Stevie Mazzone, who I might add is one of the best dressers in mob history, is said to be involved, but is under indictment and will go to prison here very soon. So you also look at several other members, including Dom Grandi, allegedly a member, is going to prison, and other people are still very involved that are just really under the shelf and just not really much around anymore or incarcerated. The thing about Philadelphia that we have to understand is, unlike most of the groups we're discussing today, all of the individuals involved allegedly with the mafia have been friends for many years. In fact, really since they were kids. And the federal government has really been unable to prove much of anything outside of small charges, including gambling and loan sharking. There just isn't much there for the feds, and they've always tried to puncture that group as far as friendships, and it's never been successful. We head up to the final five families here, and it is New York. I saved the best for last. I want to start with, alphabetically, the Bonanno crime family. The Bonanno crime family, sadly, though, has been in the news. Alleged underboss or alleged boss of the family is Michael the Nose Mancuso. I did a video on Michael Mancuso, which can be seen here quite recently. And he comes from the Vinny Basciano school up in the Bronx, said to be a bit of a lunatic. And he was involved very recently, allegedly, in ordering the beating of an individual called Joe Camarano Jr., who tried to wrestle power away from Mancuso in 2015 to 2017. Mancuso is said to be very active and the boss of the family, and that was exerted in his recent ordering shelved of Camarano and his father-in-law, and then the subsequent beating at the father-in-law's funeral. Now, the underboss is said to be Johnny Skyway Palazzolo. Now, Palazzolo comes from the old Anthony T.G. Graziano crew, and for the most part is fairly nondescript, but is said to have a very high-ranking role in the day-to-day running of the family. As we know, Palazzolo is not from the Bronx, though. He is from, I believe, Brooklyn. So he handles kind of, I think, those areas. Other members include Vinny TV Badalamenti, who at one point was the acting boss of this family in and around 2010, once Mancuso went off to prison. Other high-ranking members include Ernest Aiello, John Spirito, and Johnny Mulberry Scriamamano. They were all, or for most of those guys, were allegedly involved with the funeral beating just recently. Other members include Vincent Asaro, who is very old at this point, Little Anthony Pipitone, former member of the Giannini crew in Queens, and Ronald Giallanzo, who is serving a 14-year sentence and gets out in about 6 or 7 years. It'll be interesting to see what Ronnie G looks like once he gets out of federal prison. Definitely a respected guy, but one that stood tall in his racketeering case several years ago. The Colombo crime family is on its last legs after the death of longtime boss Mush Russo in April 2022. The question really came after the death and the recent indictment in 2021, who actually controls the Colombo crime family? And the question to me is, who the hell is left to actually control this family? Multiple members are currently under indictment, including Teddy Persico, Ralph Di Matteo, Benjamin Castellazzo, and other members. To me, it's likely, and this is probably according to the feds, you would have to think that possibly the day-to-day operations allegedly are in control of Joe Waverly Kikase. The problem is Kikase is 81 years old and has spent a lot of time in prison. He obviously, as we know, as I said in recent videos, was serving time on a 20-year beef after he committed to a murder in 2004. So there's really not many people left. Kikase probably, but that's really just alleged. Kikase could just be serving out the rest of his life in relative anonymity. It will be interesting to see once certain people get out, including Tommy Schatz Gioeli in 2023, where his standing will be in the family. He was pretty powerful when he went away. Now, he recently filed for compassionate release, but was declined by the federal government. So we'll have to wait till 2023 as to when he comes out and what he's up to. The Gambino crime family is said to be one of the more powerful groups still left in America. They're very low-key, they're very nondescript, and the goal for the Gambino family, like the other group, the Genovese, is make money, not headlines. And that's become very much an edict around Gambino territory. Allegedly, we don't always know who the boss of these families is. My money is obviously going to be on Lorenzo Menino. Now, Menino is a very interesting individual. He early in his career was very much involved with the drug trade and goes very much back to the Sicilian wing of the American Mafia. Now, as also Italian Dom Cefalo, who's very much involved as well, he also goes back to the days of the Sicilian Mafia and still is very involved in that kind of grouping. In 2019, according to an individual called Paul Semplice, Semplice was caught on wiretap discussing that he reported directly to Lorenzo Menino. That does not actually say that Menino is the boss, but from certain intelligence reports and other reports about the Gambino crime family, Menino is the guy in the Gambinos. Now, we don't actually know, and after the death of Frank Cali, it did remain cloudy as to who the actual boss is. To me, officially, it's likely Lorenzo Menino. Italian John Cefalu is in his mid-70s at this point, and he either may be very much not as involved or taking a lower key role in the day-to-day runnings of the family. One of the interesting names to be reported was in 2018-ish, 2019, it was reported that longtime Gambino crime family member Michael Paradiso was actually the consigliere of the family, which was pretty interesting. Paradiso is, in my estimation, one of the biggest lunatics still left in the mob. He was wanted and allegedly involved with up to 10 murders on behalf of the Gambino family. He goes way back to pre-John Gotti and those days. He was very close with Gotti at one point. Paradiso is still said to be very active and allegedly has been spotted in certain bars and clubs in and around Brooklyn. So he is still likely very active. It would be interesting to understand if he was ever in control of the family, what the family would then look like, because he is a bit of a loose cannon. Now, there are still very much money makers in the Gambino family. That's one thing they can say. They have earners, including Andrew Campos, who is a huge earner, him and his father, and also Carmine Top Tomato Sciandra. Now, Top Tomato gets his name from the fact that he is one of the proprietors of Top Tomato grocery stores in Staten Island. He is said to be a reputed member in Capo regime in the Genovese crime family, the Gambino crime family. The Genovese crime family are on my mind, and they are next on our list, according to many people in the American Mafia, news organizations, and the federal government. The alleged boss of the Genovese crime family is Liborio Barney Bellomo. Now, Barney is a legend. He's a prodigy and really goes back to the fact that he was made in his early 20s. He is very low-key, doesn't talk much. There are very few pictures of Bellomo, and he is said to have created a very good triumvirate around him. Now, many people also believe the true day-to-day guy, and the guy kind of the front guy, as you will, which is something the Genoveses have had for years, is this individual, Michael Mickey Ragusa. Now, Ragusa is very close to Barney Bellomo, and they go back many years. He is another low-profile individual. In fact, there is only one photo on the internet of Ragusa, which is what you want. You want to be low profile. You want to be low key. Now, Ragusa actually goes back pretty deep. He was involved in the 2000s in an indictment involving the International Longshoremen's Association, where he had a no-show job. He would actually be involved in an indictment and would be convicted and released from prison in 2005. Since 2005, Ragusa is said to have elevated into the top upper echelons of the Genovese crime family. The alleged underboss is a longtime member, Ernest Ernie Muscarella. Now, Muscarella is from Harlem and at one point was in control of the legendary 116th Street crew. He was also very involved in the early 2000s in that same ILA indictment that Ragusa was said to be involved in. Several other high-ranking members that are still in the streets include Patsy Perello, who recently got out of prison and runs a restaurant in the Bronx called Pasquale's Rigoletto. I will add, very good restaurant, one of the best. I highly recommend it. Also, Uncle Patty Falchetti, who is from Harlem and runs some of the day-to-day operations allegedly there, as well as John Brescio, who is said to be a capo out of Manhattan. He is the proprietor currently of one of the best pizza shops in New York City, Lombardi's. And as you can see by that photo, it is got surveyed the best pizza on the planet. I will add, very good pizza down in Little Italy. I'd highly recommend heading to it. But the alleged capo in that area is the owner of that facility, allegedly, in John Brescio. The final group that is active today that we have to discuss is the Lucchese crime family. And according to multiple FBI reports, at one point recently, it was alleged that the longtime official boss of the family, Vic Amuso, sent a letter in prison to a high-ranking member, Stephen Crea, saying that the current leadership should be in control as Crea and Amuso are in jail. The leadership should go to Michael DeSantis, who is said to be the current boss of the Lucchese crime family. Now, he is an individual that is fairly interesting. He, at one point, was very involved in taking care of enforcer duties for the Lucchese crime family. At one point, he was actually involved with a plot to off mob informant Little Al DiArco at the Kimberly Hotel in Manhattan. That would actually not go down. Now, Mike DeSantis would serve 18 years in federal prison and would be released in 2010 after he was fingered in certain murders involving the Lucchese crime family. The alleged underboss of the family is Patrick Patty Della Russo. Now, Della Russo is from Brooklyn and came under the old auspice of the old Paul Vario crew, which would disintegrate into the Cutea crew at one point in the 2000s. Della Russo is said to be very controlled in unions and is said to be very low key. He's another guy that we don't see much in pictures or on TV or much of anything. As we know, higher up, Stephen Crea is still fighting for a new case in the murder or alleged murder and his involvement in the killing of Michael Meldish. And it's said to be something that we'll hear about very soon. We'll have to wait and see as to what goes on with not only Stephen Crea, but Maddie Madonna and other people. One other individual I wanted to mention, someone that came in the news recently, was this individual, Joe Cafe Desena. The Desena is reputed to be a capo regime in the Lucchese crime family. He got his start in the Gambino crime family, but revert to the Lucchese family. He was under the news recently after his nephew, mob associate Peter Tuccio, was arrested on an arson beef and got 10 years in prison. Tuccio is someone that I'm sure many of you recognize. I've done a video on him. He was involved very much with posting on Instagram that he was hanging out with gangsters. He was getting in fights at bars in Howard Beach, Queens, just a bit of a hothead. And Desena was said to have went to multiple members of the Mafia to try to control his nephew. And that's where he started hanging out with certain high-ranking members in Philadelphia and other places. Tuccio got 10 years. But you have to understand, down the road, Tuccio will likely be pretty respected. I mean, he got 10 years, hasn't said a word as of yet. We have to wonder what his future will look like. But the current Mafia in America is definitely more reserved. It is not very much on the totem pole of crime in America. No one really bothers with the Mafia anymore. No one really fears the Mafia anymore. And they very much don't have much clout. There are people, though, that still respect these individuals. And in most communities, they still have some sort of standing as far as whether it's gambling. But for the most part, most people in the American Mafia today, what's left of it, are either battling indictments, just trying to stay out of the can and make money, not headlines. The edict, for the most part, is no violence, keep things quiet, and keep things under the auspice of the law. That's the goal of the Mafia today. Is it a strong organization? Not at all. In fact, I would equate that there's probably only about 10 active families still around. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a bit of a long one, but I wanted to make sure I included as much as I can. It is important for me to make this clear at the end of this video. Most of the information that I say today is alleged. Okay, I do not put people into crimes, and I wouldn't want to say anything that would get someone indicted. However, all of the information today has been alleged by the government and is widely known. I just wanted to put it on your purview. We at this show consider ourselves to be one of the bigger channels in this type of content, so I just wanted to put this out. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you next time.